Thanks to home for joining us this hour. So this was the front page at Bloomberg News today. Banner headline, markets rocked by Trump show economic fear across Wall Street. Right under that, next headline, NASDAQ 100 sheds $1.1 trillion in value. Right under that, next headline, stocks fall most this year with recession warnings blaring. Right under that, next headline, Tesla tumbles most since 2020. Next headline over, billionaires at Trump's swearing in have since lost $209 billion. Quote, the start of Trump's second term has delivered a stunning reversal for many of the billionaires who were seated behind Trump in the Capitol Rotunda while he was being sworn in. That was the front page at Bloomberg News today. Banner headline at NBC News this afternoon, quote, markets suffer brutal sell-offs as recession fears grow. This was the banner at USA Today. Quote, stocks plunge amid recession fears. Here was CNBC. Dow tumbles nearly 900 points. NASDAQ suffers worst day since 2022 as recession fears erupt. Tesla shares plunge 15%. That's in a day, suffering steepest drop in 5 years. Musk says he is running his businesses, quote, with great difficulty as shares tank. And it just keeps going. I mean, how specific do you want to get? Tariffs are lose-lose for U.S. jobs and industry, economist says. BlackRock executive says Trump deportations will have severe impact on agriculture and construction. FinTech, meaning financial technology stocks, plummet as Wall Street worries about consumer spending. And even this one, industry-specific, another industry-specific one, Delta Airlines slashes earnings outlook, citing weaker U.S. demand. Why is Delta citing weaker U.S. demand for air travel? It's because, quote, demand in the domestic market for air travel slumped in February after a series of aviation industry accidents, winter storms, and reduced government travel. Just on that one piece of it, whether or not Americans are interested in flying anywhere these days, after yet another plane crash this weekend, this time in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Atlantic magazine is now reporting on how things are going at the FAA under Donald Trump and his top campaign donor, Elon Musk, who owns both Twitter and also SpaceX, the troubled space company, with its subsidiary, Starlink, the satellite internet company. The Atlantic reports, quote, last week disruptions occurred at airports from Florida to Pennsylvania because of the explosion of the SpaceX Starship on its latest test flight, which rained down debris and snarled air traffic. When these disturbances occur, sometimes suddenly, it falls to aeronautical information specialists to update charts and maps and flight procedures that each day guide more than 45,000 flights and 2.9 million passengers across America's more than 29 million square miles of airspace. Quote, Trump's drive to downsize the federal government, as directed by Elon Musk's DOGE initiative, is drastically reducing the number of aeronautical information specialists and other workers in critical safety roles at the FAA. Interviews and internal FAA records show that as many as 12% of the nation's aeronautical information specialists have now been fired or have exited the agency. 12% of everybody who has that job in America is gone since Trump took over. Aeronautical information specialists, the people who rewrote planes when bad stuff happens. This, of course, comes after the New York Times reported on a confrontation a few days ago at the White House between Musk and the Fox Business Channel host who Donald Trump saw fit to install as our nation's transportation secretary. Quote, Mr. Duffy said the young staff of Mr. Musk's team was trying to lay off air traffic controllers. Quote, what am I supposed to do? Mr. Duffy said. I have multiple plane crashes to deal with now, and your people want me to fire air traffic controllers? And stick a pin in that for a second. We'll come back to the president's top donor and what he's doing to American air travel in just a moment and how we ought to be thinking about that given what's going on in the news right now. But As the markets crashed today, and as Wall Street and the business sector and economists broadly start to righteously freak out about what the American people have wrought by reinstalling Donald Trump in the White House, have a look at this from this weekend. This was another weekend in which we saw people protesting all over the country at Elon Musk's car company, at Tesla dealerships everywhere. Protests this weekend at the Tesla dealership in Pasadena, California, which is Southern California, also Palo Alto up in Northern California, in Decatur, Georgia, in Vancouver, Washington, in Boston at the big Tesla dealership there, in Chicago at the Tesla dealership on the Gold Coast there, in Manhattan at the Tesla dealership. There was another big protest this weekend at which people did civil disobedience and got arrested. I think this is the second, if not the third time that people have actually done civil disobedience and had to be dragged out of that Tesla showroom in New York City. This was a big weekend of protests. Women's Day this weekend brought out a lot of anti-Trump, anti-Elon Musk protesters, plus people standing up for abortion rights and for immigrants' rights. We saw big women's marches this weekend in Atlanta and in places as far-flung as Lexington, Kentucky, and Pittsburgh, Kansas, and Indianapolis. In New York City, there was a big march. In Los Angeles, they had a really big women's march. There were protests and big marches in Boston and in Sacramento and in Portland, Oregon, and at the state capitol in St. Paul, Minnesota. People demonstrated peacefully in Cincinnati this weekend, targeting Vice President J.D. Vance while he was out with his young daughter. His interactions with those protesters apparently made him very, very, very angry. Saturday saw a big protest in Bethesda, Maryland, to defend the NIH protest. Look at the size of this. In Bethesda this weekend, lots of people turned out for that. Saturday night in Washington, D.C., there was a nighttime march for drag where they marched to the Kennedy Center to protest Trump's recent personal takeover of the Kennedy Center and his executive orders attacking transgender people in every conceivable way. Saturday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there was a daytime protest to defend veterans, a protest in Milwaukee against the massive cuts that Trump has slated for the VA. New York Times reporting this weekend that Trump's huge VA cuts have already cut off midstream clinical trials for veterans with advanced cancer. These are clinical trials for veterans who effectively don't have any other treatment options left, and they are facing death. And these clinical trials at the VA might be their best shot to live, but they are canceled now because of the cuts that Trump has already imposed on the VA. That is ahead of the 80,000 people he says he's going to fire at the VA by June. On Saturday in Washington, people unfurled this huge Ukraine flag for a Don't Abandon Ukraine protest that was on the ellipse outside the White House. In Texas, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren traveled to Austin, Texas this weekend, and Elizabeth Warren rallied, look at this, in Austin, Texas, turned out 3,500 people at the state capitol in Austin. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont continued his project of rallying people all across the country this weekend. He has been specifically focused on House districts that are currently represented by Republicans. Look at this crowd. Kenosha, Wisconsin on Friday night, 4,000 people turned out in Kenosha to see Bernie Sanders. The next morning, elsewhere in Wisconsin, he was in Altoona. In Altoona, Wisconsin, on Saturday morning, more than 2,500 people showed up to see Bernie Sanders. That's about a quarter of the town's entire population. Then on Sunday, Senator Sanders went to suburban Detroit, Michigan, where he spoke to 9,000 people. More than 9,000 people turned out in Michigan to see Bernie Sanders. Town halls with members of Congress continue to be packed, and also really interesting, in Washington state this weekend, Democratic Congresswoman Emily Randall held a packed town hall in Tacoma Friday night. She was then slated to hold another one Saturday morning in Bremerton, Washington. So many people packed into that one that the venue filled up in minutes. She apparently made the decision on the spot that she would just stay and hold a whole second town hall after the morning one so that people could get in from the overflow to ask her questions. She just doubled up. And I'll say, I watched a lot of the footage from those town halls, and her constituents were asking her questions, but Congresswoman Randall's constituents were also there to holler at her to do more. Congresswoman Randall is one of the Democratic members of Congress who walked out of President Trump's speech to Congress last week, and she did get a huge round of applause from her constituents for that. But the tone of that town hall was really anguish from her constituents about what's happening in Washington, and honestly demands to her that she do more, that she somehow find a way to be even more confrontational against Trump. Again, in Texas, Congressman Joaquin Castro held a packed house, had a packed house at his San Antonio town hall as well. Local news interviewed some of his constituents who were in tears, talking about how concerned and angry they are about what Trump is doing with the government. And this is an interesting one. This is a Republican. In Western Michigan, Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga, I think that's how you say his name. It's Huizenga, Huizenga. He held a teletown hall this weekend with his constituents. He actually told his constituents on the call that he didn't want to do an in-person town hall because he thought people would be disruptive if he showed up in person. So he just did it by phone. Even still, even though it was just on the phone, that still led to his local ABC affiliate in Western Michigan, getting him on the record and on tape from that teletown hall with this.
Take a listen to what one person asked and how he, in part, responded.
I've got a lot of angst, and hopefully I'm hoping the Congress will stand up and say, yes, you are allowed to do this, Mr. President. No, Mr. President, this has to go through Congress. Is that something that Congress is willing to do?
I will fully admit, I think Elon Musk has tweeted first and thought second sometimes. And it's been, he has plunged ahead without necessarily knowing and understanding what he legally has to do or what he is going to be doing.
Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga from Michigan, afraid to meet his constituents in person, but telling them in a telephone town hall, Elon Musk has tweeted first and thought second. He has plunged ahead without knowing and understanding what he legally has to do or what he is going to be doing. The actions of Donald Trump and Elon Musk are indefensible, according to Republican members of Congress. And they do not want to have to admit that on camera in front of their constituents, let alone face them eyeball to eyeball. But doing a teletown hall still gets you on tape, even when you're just there on the phone. In Kansas this weekend, Republican Congressman Ron Estes thought that he figured out how to fix this problem. This is fantastic. Congressman Estes called for a rally. He called for a big pro-Trump rally and protest event in his district. And it was to be sponsored by a right-wing group called Americans for Prosperity. So this event, it was Saturday in Wichita, Kansas, again, called by the congressman, telling his constituents to show up to protest for Donald Trump. And the event was drowned out by a much larger group of anti-Trump protesters who showed up to protest against Donald Trump and also against their Congressman Ron Estes.
If you look at any of the signs, you'll see something, everything from protect DEI to protect women to help Ukraine. It's just a little bit of everything all at once.
Defend Democracy organizers use the rally as a lightning rod, aiming to express their opposition to state leaders on a variety of topics.
The DEI, USAID, the firing of so many people for no reason, the park rangers.
Arguing that the job cuts by President Donald Trump and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency are only hurting Kansans.
Again, that was supposed to be the pro-Trump event. Dang nabbit! Republican Congressman Ron Estes of Kansas trying to get people to rally for Trump, trying to get some good press for the Republicans and Trump, but then the number of people who turn out in Kansas to protest against him and against Trump just totally dwarfs what he was trying to do. Let me just show you one more little 10-second blip of this. This is the very end of that local news package on KSN in Kansas. Now, Congressman Estes, how'd it go trying to get some good press for your pro-Trump event that was totally swamped by anti-Trump protesters? How did it go?
We intended to speak to Ron Estes, but he left the rally before addressing the media present. Here for you, Peyton Snyder, KSN News 3.
Republican Congressman Ron Estes of Kansas. Step 1, invite the media. Step 2, forget that your own constituents are horrified at Donald Trump and looking for any opportunity to protest him. Step 3, leave without talking to the media. Very important. Hope that they forget that you are the one who invited them to be there, to show off all the Trump love in your district. There were also good-sized protests today in New York City after the Trump administration sent immigration agents to address a legal permanent resident of the United States, a green card holder, who had also been involved in protests against Israel's war in Gaza at Columbia University. Tonight, a federal judge in New York has blocked the Trump administration from deporting that young man and forcing him out of the country, despite the fact that he is a legal permanent resident and has a green card. That federal judge has called a hearing on the matter on Wednesday, says he wants everybody involved in that case to be there in person for that hearing, and that young man cannot be sent out of the country. In this case, the administration has made clear that's not only something they want to do, it's something they want to do specifically and only because of this man's political views. There's no criminal allegations against him. There's no, material support of terrorism allegations against him or anything. There's nothing. They just don't like his politics, and they see that as reason to revoke his legal status in this country and try to force him out. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in addition to defending and advancing that, also joined with Elon Musk this weekend in a bizarre attack on our ally Poland. I mean, just for context here, many observers believe that after Trump gives Putin free rein to do what he wants in his war in Ukraine, Putin will keep going and push into Georgia in the south, which he already invaded in 2008. In the southwest, he's already got a big footprint in Moldova. He appears to be aggressively meddling in the government and elections of Romania already. And of course, due west of Ukraine, sharing a long land border with Ukraine, is our very close ally, Poland. This weekend, President Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, tweeted insults at the foreign minister in Poland and bragged about how Ukraine would collapse without what he called my Starlink system. My Starlink system. That's his satellite internet terminals that are widely used in Ukraine and that Poland mostly pays for. Secretary of State Marco Rubio then jumped in on that and demanded that the Polish foreign minister should say thank you to Elon Musk. And there's a lot to say about this radical 180-degree shift the United States is currently making, switching sides in the world and in the war to join Russia and turn against our allies. I mean, Poland has just announced that it's now going to require every adult male in the country to undergo military training, and they are going to more than double the size of their army. And that is not because they're trying to make anybody feel impressed about their defense spending. It's because they're expecting to soon be at war with Russia, because they are expecting Russia to invade them. France has announced that now that the United States no longer appears to be allied with Europe, and it has been our nuclear umbrella that has been seen as the primary nuclear defense of Europe, President Emmanuel Macron of France is now saying that since the United States no longer appears to be allied with Europe, it may have to be France that posts its nuclear weapons as protection all over Europe now. They're talking about wildly expanding the nuclear deterrent afforded by France in Europe. Both Poland and Germany are also now talking about getting their own nuclear weapons. Oh, good. Trump has meanwhile just cut our support for nuclear non-proliferation detectives all over the globe. These are the people who hunt for those who are trying to illicitly acquire nuclear weapons or materials. They work all over the world, including Iran. Trump has just cut our funding for those activities. Wired magazine reports that Trump and Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon are about to cut 75% of the Defense Department programs that aim to stop proliferation of nuclear weapons, as well as chemical and biological weapons. NBC News reports tonight that Trump additionally is just going to fire 8 to 10% of all the generals and admirals at the senior levels of the United States military, because sure, why not? That one he's going to put a bow on when he delivers it to Red Square, I think, right? That one's extra special. But amid all the things going on with our flipping sides, and us now berating and hurting our previous allies, while we take very, very ambitious steps to destroy not only our alliances, but our own military power, our intelligence relationships, and our own economy. While we're doing that, right? Gutting the US federal government, hurting the military, hurting our intelligence relationships, ruining our alliances, and trashing the economy. Well, we're busy with all of those things. There's just one other thing that kind of, I think, brings all sides of the news today together. Remember at the top I said stick a pin in that? I mentioned that there's this new reporting on the impact of what Trump and Musk are doing at the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Amid all these plane crashes and the crisis they are causing by firing all the people who keep the planes in the sky. At the Atlantic magazine, Isaac Stanley Becker reports on a SpaceX employee who has now been installed at the FAA, quote, to deploy equipment from Starlink across the FAA's communication network. Starlink, of course, Elon Musk's satellite internet terminals company. The directive, quote, promises to make the nation's air traffic control system dependent on Elon Musk, using equipment that experts say has not gone through strict US government security and risk management review. So just put those two things together. Well, we've got, this weekend, Elon Musk threatening our ally Poland, which is more than doubling its army, talking about nuclear weapons, and preparing to be invaded by Russia. We've got Elon Musk threatening them, saying, you know, my Starlink system, my system, is what is determining the course of the war right now. So be quiet, small man. He actually said that, be quiet, small man. It's my technology, my Starlink system that is deciding the war. I'm the one. And while we've got Musk behaving that way against one of our allies when it comes to Starlink, we apparently are simultaneously giving over all US airspace to Starlink as well by letting him take over US air traffic control technology at the FAA, installing his own company in place of the companies that have been cleared by the FAA to provide that technology. Not to put too fine a point on it, but as noted today at The Atlantic, quote, Starlink presents many risks, said one expert, quote, part of the risk is that Musk could simply choose to switch the devices off. If Starlink runs American airspace, because that's what Donald Trump is letting his top campaign donor do, that gives Elon Musk the ability to shut down American airspace at will. Because after all, Starlink is my Starlink system, according to him, and he can do with it what he wants. Now Donald Trump says that's what's going to run air traffic control in the United States. Seem like a good idea? U.S. Senator Mark Kelly is with us tonight. He just got back from Ukraine. He joins us here live next.